Hey, it's Jen, and it's time for the Chord devlog. This week, we sat down with Jamie and Miko to talk about everyone's favorite anonymous, venomous, spray painting bassist Shinobi 13. Let's check out what they had to say.
On the visual side, he came from a couple different places. So first off, it was sort of the idea of you take the Foot Clan from Ninja Turtles and you stick them all on skateboards. That's kind of where he started. And then it snowballed a bit from there, where it shifted into a little bit more of a samurai look for him, because the Oni masks had a really great look for it. And then on top of the skateboard stuff, mixing in some of the graffiti and just paint patterns on his clothing. That started to give him a little more of a character, and also it helped give him a bit of a theme as well, because he was working with a lot of poison and corrosion and toxin stuff. So we were able to use all that really colorful paint in his effects to kind of feel like different kinds of gas clouds. And then there was also the idea of taking a lot of his clothing and making it super dark, and then using the graffiti patches over top to give him a bit of a stealth feel as well, in that he'd be kind of like a chameleon, but only in an overly graffitied scene. So he would disappear into the sort of graffiti that he would be adding to the walls. So it was kind of where a lot of his visual stuff came from. And he was actually probably the first character that we did any concepts for, even back before we really knew what the game was going to be.
When it came to his design and the iteration there, he didn't seemingly go through a lot of changes, but he was kind of at the center of the development of the class versus character card types. And there was a lot of reorganizing of what's appropriate for him versus what's appropriate for just his class that's shared with all the other bass players. His kit evolved pretty rapidly once we had that idea, and this idea of the corrosion that he was using. Originally, only corrosion existed in the game, and a lot of his kit was built around that. Once poison was introduced, then the kit really expanded, and that's where the full character kind of started to manifest. In terms of his gear, that was actually established very early in terms of how it was going to function. It didn't change until relatively recently, where we decided that his damage kind of falls off at some point. So how can we get his gear to work more effectively and provide that kind of late game damage that you really need? And that's where we came up with the idea the damage they were doing was proportional to the amount of toxin that they were applying to the targets.
Yeah, initially he was just adding corrosion every time he hit, which was fine in the early fights, but it meant later on he was getting weaker and weaker as the armor on characters got better. And also, as the armor was removed from characters, his strength kind of disappeared. So we did turn that around, and he pretty quickly became a favorite for a lot of people, because you could get some really ridiculous damage numbers out of him now. And that kind of turned into, how can we make everybody feel more like they can become ridiculously overpowered along the way, as opposed to how can we make sure everybody stays at a relatively even power level. It became, how can one character really explode if you want them to?
You want to really build up his ability to actually use his more expensive abilities. Don't forget that even though corrosion might fall off in its effect if enemies have started to run low on their armor, it's still providing that damage bonus when you do actually attack. So having not just enough support abilities to apply poison and corrosion, make sure that you have a lot of attack abilities as well, just so you can take advantage of it, because that AoE really adds up.
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep in mind all of the multi-hit attacks that they've got. Partner them up with Stitch, get Augment, get a lot of power on them, take advantage of all those extra hits, because the corrosion and the toxins that you're adding, those will take advantage of the extra hits as well. So it's not necessarily about any one attack doing a lot of damage, it's about how you can do 3 attacks, 4 attacks for 1 energy, and how all of those will just compound how much damage you're doing there.
So one of my personal favorite cards is Plague Winds, which lets him summon 3 of his own cards at random. You never know what you're going to get, and sometimes they completely change the course of a fight. And because of the behavior of the card, sometimes you get really lucky and get 3 duplicates of a poison cloud and can play that for free and just wipe an enemy team with a really lucky roll. A lot of his gimmick, being a bass player and being who he is that there's a lot of luck in whether you get the hits you want. So I like how that plays off.
Yeah, I'm pretty easy when it comes to this. My preference is any of his AoE stuff where I can add poison or corrosion to the entire enemy team, and then anything where I can attack the entire enemy team at once. He's a really fun one to try and stack any sort of gear that will give you additional energy charges so that you can start doing some of his really big attacks for really cheap amounts. He's also one of the really fun ones to see just how much damage you can do in a turn, because when you suddenly get 20 poison or 20 toxins on an enemy character, and then you're doing some multi-hit attacks, and you find that you're doing 60, 70, 90 damage in a single turn. Those are really fun ones. They can be dangerous though because you have to build up to them, but those are some of the really fun moments where you can just wipe out an entire enemy team in one shot.
In other exciting news, Chord is being featured in the Steam Next Fest starting on Monday, June 13th. Be sure to check out our Steam page for a very special surprise dropping next week. Do you want to get in on the action? Be sure to join the official Chord Discord server to get news and announcements straight from the devs. Haven't wishlisted the game yet? Now is the perfect time. Both links can be found in the description below. Well, that's all from me. I'll catch you bandmates next time.